Hi, everyone. My name is Tal Oppenheimer. I'm a product manager on the Chrome team, and I'm here to talk to you about the mobile web and how you can create amazing mobile experiences, particularly for users in India. So as we know, in India in particular, we see users coming online for the very first time on their mobile devices. This means that they're interacting with the experiences that you build on a smartphone, and they haven't necessarily interacted with it on any other device. Now, when we talk about the mobile web, and mobile overall, we know that there are different constraints that come in when users are accessing your experience on a mobile device. Screen sizes can vary quite greatly, with a lot of devices being relatively small in size. We know that RAM can also vary, and we still see a number of devices with 512 megabytes RAM coming out in the market. And what's more, on-device storage can also vary to the same extent. There are a lot of devices that are still coming out with 4 gigabytes of on-device storage, and so a lot of users are relying on external SD cards for their storage needs. And this means that when you're developing for these users on these devices, you have some different challenges when you're thinking about how to actually deliver your experience to them. With native apps, installs can be a real barrier. Users need to take an extra step to even interact with your experience in the first place. And they don't necessarily know what they're getting. And so you have this extra step that you're expecting users to take before they've even seen what you have to offer. What's more is even if users take this extra step to install your experience, the storage constraints on their device can make it really problematic for them to actually be able to install it, even if they're trying to. And so you need to focus a lot on shrinking your APK size and making it small so that it can actually fit on people's devices. And finally, we're all developing things frequently and improving our experience constantly. And you always want to make sure your users are up to date. But with all of these various constraints, both on a connectivity standpoint and with just the storage space on your device, it can become really challenging to get users on the latest experience with the best features that you've built. And keeping them up to date can be really hard. But there is a platform that all users have on their smartphone that actually addresses a number of these issues. The mobile web is set up to actually help with a lot of these problems. With the mobile web, your experience right off the bat is accessible to everyone without any install barrier. This means that they can navigate to it and see the experience you have immediately. They don't need to take any extra steps from there. As a result, storage constraints that might be introduced due to their device and the sort of profile of that device aren't a problem for them to interact with your experience for the very first time. And as you actually improve your experience on the platform, the users are automatically up to date. The next time they navigate to your experience, it's right there. They have the latest feature. You don't need to worry about convincing them to install an update or anything of that sort. But in addition to just the constraints that the mobile web can address, the mobile web also has an incredible reach. Looking at the average apps used per month, we see that on native, a user on average visits about 25 native apps per month, compared to mobile, where we see 4 times this amount, with users navigating to over 100 mobile web experiences per month. And this really translates to a drastically increased reach. Looking at the top 1,000 mobile websites and the top 1,000 native apps, we see that on average, the mobile web sees roughly 2.5 times the number of unique monthly visitors. And so by having a mobile web experience, you're really able to get more users and expand that growth. What's more, a recent analysis by Morgan Stanley found that not only is there a difference in the discoverability and the access that people have to mobile web, but this is actually growing at a faster rate. So we're seeing 2 times the growth of mobile web traffic than we are seeing to native mobile traffic. And just to put this in perspective and give a specific example here, Flipboard recently launched a mobile web experience. And when they launched this experience, they saw a 75% increase in their user base on mobile. And this was on mobile overall, not just on mobile web. So by launching this mobile web experience, they were able to grow their user base across the board on mobile because they're removing some of these barriers to people interacting with their experience in the first place. And beyond just the reach of mobile web, there's a lot that the mobile web and that we on the Chrome team are working on to make sure that the experience users get across the web is one that works really well, particularly with some of the constraints and challenges that we see in India. While we already have a data saver feature on Chrome for Android, we recently launched an improvement to our data saver feature that lets users save up to 70% of their data. And we launched this in India first. What this feature does is when we identify a particularly slow network, We replaced most images on the page with placeholders so that users remain in control of where their data is going. Users can still load images as needed by either long pressing on a single image or just selecting load all images for that page. And so what we've done here is helped remove the barrier for those users who are particularly sensitive to data to make sure that they're always able to access the experiences that they want and need on the mobile web. But we also know that sometimes users are just completely offline, and we want to make sure that the mobile web works well for them as well. And as a result, we're currently doing a field trial for a new feature that will let users proactively offline content on the mobile web. This way, users can reliably know that if they need a piece of information on your experience or across the web in general, they can get it whether they're online or offline. But in addition to some of these improvements that we've made on Chrome, we've also been working to improve the mobile web platform as a whole to make sure that it really works well in India and beyond. And as part of this, we're introducing a new concept called progressive web apps. And what this really does is builds on the experience that we have in Chrome, but in a more general area, to make sure that you have all the capabilities you need on the mobile web. And to talk more about that, I'm going to hand it over to Paul Kinlan, a developer advocate on the Chrome team.
Hey, Tal, thank you. Hi, everyone. I won't lie, I'm a little bit nervous. I've got my water because my mouth is getting dry, and I'm told that this is a flat table, so I'm going to put this over there. But in the meantime, I'm going to ask you a question. Who's excited about Star Wars? Good couple of people, it's good. Who wants to know how it ends? No one, good, because I don't know how it ends either. So I actually do want to ask some serious questions. So who in the audience is builds native applications? Not primarily, but as a part of just builds native applications for Android. So it's part of the audience. I know one person builds for the web, because I've seen the tweets. Who's JS lovers? There's someone in the audience. There we are, hello. I see your tweets. So who's a web developer? Oh, that's good, it's a good number. So I'm here to talk about kind of progressive web applications. Actually, this is my slide, this is me. Doesn't really matter that much. But I'm here to talk about progressive web applications. And one of the things I want to talk about, and I'm going to use constantly, or try to use constantly throughout this experience, is this experience created by Flipkart. We think that this is a progressive web application. And what we mean by a progressive web application are a number of things. One is the kind of traditional web applications that can work across, in theory, any browser from UC Mini up to kind of the latest versions of Chrome. But ideally, they're enhanced through progressive enhancement as the browser capabilities become greater on each of the browsers. So we know, for instance, that UC Mini especially doesn't necessarily always support JavaScript. You should be able to build a progressive web application that ultimately works across these browsers. And then as the browser capabilities get more enhanced, you can kind of level up the experiences with more kind of features and capabilities. But that's the kind of the web side of the thing. That's the kind of the progressive web part of progressive web applications. And the apps part is one of the things that we've been trying to work on over the last couple of years in the Chrome team, is trying to let you as a web developer build more engaging app-like experiences. And there are a number of things that we know that these experiences need to do. And we know there are a number of things where the Android and the kind of the iPhone app ecosystem excels over kind of what you can deliver on the web. And primarily, it's all about kind of working offline and building kind of resilient applications that work especially well in scenarios where there's either poor networks or 2G or kind of high latency as well. They work offline, like we said, but they're also fast and smooth. And what we mean by fast and smooth is they're smooth to interact with. You click a button, and it kind of does the thing that you want it to do. But more importantly, it loads instantly. And normally, native applications work quite well in this scenario because all the kind of content and logic and structure is kind of downloaded when you do that first download. And we don't always get that on the web. But they're also easy to re-engage with as well. Native applications have a lot of features which allow users to kind of keep coming back to your application, whether it's something that's on the home screen and they can tap and it loads instantly, or whether it's via something like a push notification where they have contextually relevant and timely information to the user that is delivered to their device, they tap it and go into the application. And for a long time, we've not been able to do that on the web, but we've been working on these technologies for a little while inside Chrome, and we think the kind of the progressive web apps kind of brand, or not brand essentially, but name and moniker, actually kind of identifies all these different technologies that we've brought to the web to enable you to build these kind of native-like experiences. So I briefly kind of talked about all the different kind of capabilities that you kind of want to get from an application platform at least. But fundamentally, they're broken into 3 different areas. The fact that users and developers want their experiences to be installable and on the device and immediately accessible to the users when they tap on the icon. Their performance, as in like they're smooth to scroll, but they also load instantly. And ultimately, they're engaging. They integrate with all the device's native features as and when the user needs them. So I want to talk about some of the work that we've been doing on the Chrome side of things, and also with other browser vendors as well, including Mozilla and Opera, to talk about how you can make installable experiences. And the first, and one of the most popular features that developers requested, was the ability to do add to home screen. Now, Flipkart have done this experience as well with add to home screen, where they can get your experience installed onto the device. And it's done in a couple of ways, and I'm going to talk about how it's done with the manifest file in a minute. But fundamentally, once Chrome understands and knows that your experience is a progressive web application, we can do the prompt that we saw a second ago automatically to ask the user whether they want to install this experience on the device, whether they want to have a closer relationship with that experience. And Flipkart do a really nice thing where in the top right of this screen, there's a little person icon. They defer the fact that we can tell the user that they can install this experience to a point in time when they want the user to install the experience. So we have the heuristics behind the scenes that let you build these installable experiences that don't get in the way of a user trying to complete a transaction. The next to this is that once you've actually got your experience on the home screen, normally on the web, when you click the link, you get a white screen and a URL bar across the top, and it kind of sits there for a good couple of seconds, and it takes a little while to load up. Well, you don't want that in an app-like experience. So recently, we've just introduced the splash screen. And the idea behind the splash screen is you can get your brand and your presence inside that load-in experience. While the browser is trying to boot up, and also load up your experience, you can have your brand there until the first paint happens. And then once that happens, you're in complete control. And again, it's quite simple to implement. And the way that you do implement the add to home screen experience, you don't need things like Service Worker, which we've also talked a little bit about the rest of today, is you just need a manifest file and a small piece of HTML. The manifest file basically describes how your experience should appear on the user's device. What is the name on the home screen? What is the icon that that should be displayed that the user needs to click? But you can also describe what the theme color is, like when the user goes to the tab switcher, what is the color of the application bar across the side? But more importantly, you can describe and control exactly how you want the user to enter your experience. So you can provide things like the start URL, which lets the user basically boot up and go to the front page rather than a random page in the application that they might have bookmarked. And you can also do other things like control whether it launches full screen, which is probably the thing that you want to do if you're building an application, or whether it launches in a browser tab. And you can also control things like the orientation that it starts in. So if you're building a game, you can start in landscape versus the default of portrait. And then you just link to the manifest from every single page, and then Chrome will be able to then offer that prompt to the users. But once we've got our application installed, or installed on the device, the worst thing that can happen is that the user clicks the link, and then if you don't have an internet connection, it just gets to the Chrome error page. That's a really bad experience for users, and it's a really poor thing for developers because we don't want these experiences not to look like they're part of the system. So we've introduced a new API called Service Worker, and it's basically a logical extension to some other offline APIs that we've had. But the most important thing is that Service Worker adds an app-like lifecycle to your web app and your web page. Web pages normally, they live and die with the amount of time that the user is on them. They load up, you get a couple of events that come through that you can respond to, such as onload and a whole bunch of other things. And then when you close it, that's the end of the session. With Service Worker, it's basically pushed into the system so that it can live in the background. It's a piece of JavaScript that can live in the background and respond to system events. It can respond to browser events, such as every single HTTP request coming from your page, or it can respond to other system-level events, such as things like push notifications. But the important thing here is it lives in the background, but only wakes up when this operating system tells it to wake up. So it's in an idle state for the majority of its time. The first event that you do get, or the first state it's in, though, it's activated. It's working. It's doing something. And the very first time that you get into the activated state, you get this thing called an install event. And at that point, you can decide exactly how you want to start to offline your experience. You can basically download all your assets, your index page, your JavaScript, your HTML, and your CSS. The way to think of it, it's like a completely scriptable install process. Whereas where you're in the Play Store or the Apple App Store, you press install and it downloads all the packages. The user's never taken away from the page in this case. They're using their application at their website, but in the background, you're controlling what assets are needed for the user to be able to go offline. But at this point, things are installed, but you're not actually working offline. You as a developer have to do some work to get there. So the Flipkart experience, again, is a great example of exactly how this works. But the idea is that every single time that the browser requests a page and your service worker is installed in the system, every single time that it requests a page for your domain, you'll be able to get an event that says, we need to fetch this URL from the server. And at that point, you can decide exactly what to do. Like, think of the service worker at this point like a completely scriptable client-side proxy service that is controlled via JavaScript. So the request comes in, and you can decide exactly what to do. And in Flipkart's case, they've already got all the assets that they need, but as you navigate around the site, they've already pre-cached like all the pages that you've been to, so that when you do go offline, and they do like a nice little kind of gray effect, when you do go offline, you get the ability to say, well, I can still go back to those pages and I can still view the content. I might not be able to complete the transaction, but you're still inside that experience. And this is one of those experiences where we've never really had this on the web. It's not been amazingly possible to do. And it is possible now with Service Worker and a bunch of other APIs. But that's not just kind of the only thing that you can do with Service Worker in terms of understanding all the network requests that go through. You can also make your experiences performant as well. And again, this is entirely due to the fact that your Service Worker is completely in your control. Every single request that comes through from your page, you get to decide what to do. And we can make it fast even on 2G. And actually, I want to call out, I'm on Wi-Fi when I recorded this video, but the Wi-Fi is a 2G, it simulates a 2G network. So this is loading like it's on a 2G network at the moment. And the reason why you can actually get this kind of performance benefit from Service Worker itself is because, again, you have a number of different strategies that you can use inside your Service Worker. For instance, one strategy you could use is offline first. You know, you always make sure that you check the cache that you've stored of all the assets that you've gone through and return them. If they're in the cache, that's what the user sees. If it's not in the cache, you go out to the network. And this is great. Like, if you've got a JSON-based API, you can just incrementally update the page and cache the results as you go along. But it's not just about kind of Service Worker. There are a number of other things that we've done inside the browser recently to help you as web developers make more intelligent decisions about how you actually control the network side and the server side of your experience. And traditionally, the web, you have the client, and then you have the server. And the server really doesn't know much about the client. It doesn't know any kind of information about what the user's device is apart from the user agent string. And we've made a couple of changes in Chrome recently to give you extra kind of context and information in every single HTTP request if you, as a developer, opt into it. So for instance, you can understand the screen density, the DPR, or the screen width, and then you can serve up different images and different assets based on, you know, if it's a screen density, super low density screen, then you don't want to send a high density image down the wire because people aren't going to see all those pixels. But we're also doing some other things as well, which they haven't quite landed just yet, but they're being worked on. And as Tal mentioned before with the demo about preload, kind of not loading the images when we know we're on an impaired network, we also have a saved data hint. And the idea behind the saved data hint and the header there is that you can decide as a developer, oh, I know that the user has actually opted in to have kind of, you know, like the data to use the data compression proxy. Therefore, I'm not going to do things which would suck up their bandwidth and suck up their data. For instance, you might say, I'm not going to autoplay images when the user has a save data hint on. And we also have a thing called downlink max. And when I was in Bangalore a couple of weeks ago, loads of developers were asking for the ability to understand what the maximum performance of the current user's connection is. And we have downlink max inside Chrome right now, but it only reports the maximum viable connection speed. So for instance, it'll say, I'm on like 52, I can do 52 kilobits a second or whatever it is for 2G. That doesn't actually say what the network quality is like at the moment, but it gives you a good indication of what type of network the user is on, so you, again, can make a sane decision about how to serve up assets to your users. And also, like, we know it's actually quite hard to build these experiences, especially when there's lots of different variables at play. So we've also got a tool called PageSpeed Service. It can integrate into Nginx or Apache. And the idea behind it is it can automatically do a whole bunch of these optimizations, so you don't have to make a whole lot of changes to your build process and your deployment process. You just basically kind of put this one line in your, well, you have to install it into Apache, but you put it in your Apache configuration, and then like this service will automatically optimize for bandwidth. So for instance, in this case, it will automatically optimize for WebP images if it knows that the browser client can actually handle them. Sorry, I'm just going to get a drink. So performance is good, and we like performance, and we like having our experiences work offline. But the thing that developers want is they want their experiences to work kind of like they would expect native applications to work. They want to have access to all the different types of device functionality that are available normally to native applications. Now, some of the stuff, and the biggest feature that developers have asked for, I think it was about 2 years ago, and we finally implemented it in March, was push notifications. If you're an Android developer and you've done kind of any GCN kind of push-based notifications before, it's exactly the same way of working. The user has to opt in, but once they've opted in, your server can then essentially send a notice to the GCM service. GCM will wake up the device, and then inside the device, it'll go, okay, which service worker needs to be woken up to actually deliver this push notification? And then the push notification will wake up, the service will wake up, and then you will define exactly how you want your experience to kind of create a push notification. And these are native-like push notifications as well. You can have actions and a whole bunch of other stuff, and images are going to come in line soon. But the whole point about it is we're not actually keeping the site open. You can get these push notifications even when it's in the background, and we're trying to save as much battery as possible because the service worker will only respond when GCM has told it to wake up and actually create the notification. So there is some kind of interesting data that we've got with this. One of them is that we've had a number of partners and developers implement this API. Beyond the Rack is an e-commerce company in America. And when they implemented push notifications, they kind of did a trial for about a month or two. And one of the things that they noticed was that they saw a 72% increase in time spent on site from users responding and interacting with the push notification. And they saw a 26% increase in average spend of users who have actually engaged again via a push notification. So just with this one change, they're not necessarily a progressive web app, but with this one change, they've managed to kind of meaningfully impact their business by actually being able to provide this without having to go through the costly app install cycle. And it's not just Beyond the Rack that are using it in Facebook. We're now starting to see, I think it's a good couple of thousand developers using push notifications. And we're starting to see over 50 million messages a day being sent through the service, which it's less than what you'd expect from on the Android side of things, but we've only just got started with this and we're seeing great traction. But it's not just about engagement. Engagement isn't just about using push notifications and trying to get the user to reuse your app. It's about trying to interact with all of the capabilities inside the device. So I kind of briefly want to cover some of the things that we can do. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail, but all with the user's permission. You can access the camera and kind of be responsive to, if they want to take an image, you can take an image and upload it and manipulate it. You can understand kind of what the user's saying, but you can access the microphone with the user's permission and be able to kind of build audio-based applications. You can understand the network stack, whether the user is online, whether they're using Wi-Fi or a cellular connection. We can also access the user's location again. It's been there for years, but we can access the user's location again, entirely with their permission. We don't get it straight away. And one of the interesting things that's coming really soon is the ability to discover devices that are around you, that are broadcasting via BLE, connect to those devices, and then interact with any kind of BLE device just via JavaScript without having to have a native application installed. And finally, you can integrate with things like the native subsystems via the Android intent system and kind of integrate with the Android native sharing API just via using an intent syntax URL. So the web platform itself, and especially on Chrome for Android, is actually quite powerful, and it enables you to build these rich experiences. They can work offline. They can work in kind of spotty network connectivity issues. And the great thing, the reason why I like progressive web apps as a concept is because if you don't want to install the experience, you can still use that experience and engage with the users. But as the user becomes more engaged and they start using your service more and more, you can get it installed. You can level it up, use push notifications, and all these things as the user goes along. It's a really powerful way to think about how you're building the next generation of web experiences. I just want to leave with one last thing, and I've seen this a lot in the kind of the general industry. It's happened in India, it's happened in the UK as well, and there's massive focus on developers going app only. And I think app only is the wrong strategy for developers. Again, think web only is also the wrong strategy for developers. It's a much more nuanced kind of landscape, but fundamentally, the web is critical to your mobile strategy and your mobile story overall, because the power of the web is the fact that you can give someone a link, they can click on it and start using your experience straight away, and then you can level them up. And then when you need to, when the browser platform can't take advantage of some of the features that have just come to the web platform, geofencing might be one of the examples, then you can naturally upgrade them into the native experience. But the important thing is you've got the users straight away, you've engaged with them, they love your service, they love your brand, and they're much more likely to actually keep engaging with it and then install your applications. So with that, I just want to say thank you very much, and I've gone a little bit over time, but I'd like to introduce Jason back to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent.
Cool.